Welcome. I'd like to call this Finance Committee meeting to order. The first item we're going to have, but we don't have right now, is the final 2023 to 2027 budget review and approval. I think Keith, we're going to have it today.
Yeah, I have it today, and I'm going to put it on the website, and so we can distribute it, and then everybody can go from there.
Okay, because we'll probably have a meeting between now and the next meeting, which is December 12th. Because we need to talk about the approval, then we need to talk about if we need to do any reallocation of the income tax or what we want to do, where we stand. So we'll probably have a meeting within the next 2 weeks to talk about that, if everybody's okay with that. And Kathy will probably send out a notice on that, so we can go through the final budget and talk about that. So the next one we have is assignment for request for council action. We have several for the Finance Committee. We have 22-253 budget amendments, 22-254 rollover of outstanding advances from the TIF fund, 22-255 amend salaries and benefits code, create new IT fund and accept job descriptions, 22-257 MOU with Cleveland Clinic Police Department, 22-258 zoning map amendment I-1 to an R3, 22-259 room tax for hotels, motels, and transient stays, 22-260 review update parking policy and historic district, and 22-261 amend salaries and benefits code 3103 pay scales for 2023, 2024, and 2025. The item that we have on here that came back up is 18-138, consider legislation prohibiting feeding of deer and wild animals. This has made a long journey from 2018, has been discussed numerous times, and several legislative items came out of this. So I guess, Bill, this originated out of your committee, special legislation, and came to finance, and I think is now being talked about in a broader sense of the other item that came out of special legislation, the non-lethal method of handling deer. So I don't know what we want to do with this, and I don't know, Bill, if you have any more thoughts on it. I mean, it could be talked about here in finance. It could be going back to special legislation, but we probably should do something with it. Thoughts?
Okay.
Okay.
Well, when we did this, you're right about the long history. This, I think it originated it might have been 2 years. It might have been 2 years now. Sometimes I seem to have lost track because of COVID, but I think it was about 2 years, possibly. And then inadvertently added dogs and cats, and then pulled that out, and then spent 8 months, I think, putting together the TNR program for cats. And then we went back to committee and worked with the law director, with Greg Huber, on this to try to do some refining. And we took it to committee and passed it out of committee. Those committee meetings were the origin of what became lethal, non-lethal culling, and brought it up here. And then my understanding was we tabled it at the time. And my sense about that was we tabled it because we felt it should be part of something. It should be included in some form, if it was going to be included, of the larger non-lethal part of the deer management plan. And so with the completion of the non-lethal part of the plan, it would seem to me that would be where this discussion would belong. And then that would be, I presume, then that would be back in special legislation. If we are going to talk about it tonight, I have a number of questions. I have further comments on it. If in fact we're going to continue to discuss it tonight, I can do that now, or we can, you can handle differently. But if we're going to discuss it tonight, then I do have quite a bit more to say about it.
Well, I think the question that we were always posed, and we started this in 2018, is it always led to different legislation. I mean, we never really got through the not feeding of the wild animals because we have adopted various legislation out of this request that kept coming back. But I mean, I think I received an email from a gentleman, I guess Bob Anthony, from 662 West Sturbridge Drive in Medina, that he talked about, what he wanted to do, and I'll forward it to Kathy, and then Kathy could forward it to everybody about
think
feeding
we got
wild
this
animals.
one.
Of course, he does not want wild animals to be fed, but we've had a lot of discussion on that over the years. But what does everybody think? Do we put it as a part of a proposal for the non-lethal method? Because we talked about either doing a lethal and non-lethal in combination, but now the lethal is going to be voted on in the public, but we still need to have another piece of that legislation. So does everybody agree that it should go back to Bill's committee and talk about it, or do you want to talk about it here, or, because it's going to be a big lengthy discussion, whatever you want to do. I mean,
I think it should go back to.
does everybody go back? Or do
I
you-
would say back to special legislation, just because it is such a lengthy topic, and, I think we were so caught up on the deer part, that there might be other feeding of the wild animal ones. If we can just focus on the wild animal part, we can get a lot more done in special legislation, and it'll give the public advance notice that this is what, we're talking about this in depth.
I like the idea of sending it back to special legislation as well.
Sounds like that's where we're heading, so I'm okay.
All right, Bill, what we'll do is we'll submit this, since it's in finance now, take it back to special legislation. Do what you want, either A, separately, or with a larger program with the deer management, non-lethal method of deer management as far as feeding, and that may be fine. Because I know you and Mr. Huber worked on it, and we've talked about it enough where we have it refined pretty well. But you may
Well,
want to add that.
right, so I think what I'll do is I'm going to go back to, with the law director, because I have, in reading through it and how it's applied, and if you look at the definition of a lot of the terms that we used, I think we need to look at refining it. And so prior to having another meeting, I want to be comfortable with an understanding of the intention of the language in a more specific way. And I think we can handle that at a meeting.
That's fine.
Okay,
That
thank
makes
you.
sense. Okay, so we're going to push that back to special legislation to, as it changed and morphed throughout the various meetings that we've had. I think there is a consensus, at least, that we should do something about, at least I understand that from council, feeding wild animals. And the last iteration of the legislation, as you mentioned, probably should be refined more based upon what we've learned from ODNR and others about the deer too. So I think it's not just only about deer, of course. I think Reggie mentioned, at least in Wadsworth, they have a problem with skunks. So people feeding skunks, and I don't think we want to have that happen here.
No, we don't.
I don't think
No,
we want
thank you.
people feeding skunks here. So, okay, we'll put that back there. So Bill, that's back in your committee. The next item we have is 22-249, amend Chapter 909, small cell wireless facilities. Patrick?
Yes, once again, we're going to ask that this be tabled. We're still waiting to get some information from our outside counsel on this and haven't received it yet.
Okay, we'll table that one. 22-253, budget amendments, we have one. 22-041, repayments for miscellaneous. Keith?
These are mostly advances. Advances are generally where we get a grant, although the one for the TIF is a little bit different, but it's a similar concept. The city spent money in the TIF district, and that is to be repaid by the TIF revenues. We move those expenditures to the TIF fund, and then this advance is our way of documenting that this money is owed back to us because as that revenue comes in. And the state auditors do require that advances be rolled every year in order to keep current, to show that council still intends to repay them. So each year, we're just going to come back to you, and however much money we've collected from the TIF, we'll knock it off, and then we'll roll the rest of it and keep rolling it until it gets paid back.
So the next ordinance talks about that.
Right, that's
More
specific to the advance. The rest of them are grants, and then there's a couple adjustments down here for the books and a contractual and a grant.
Okay. Any questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Then 22-254 is the rollover extending advances for the TIF fund, as you just talked about.
Right.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-255, amend salaries amendment for code, create an IT department and approve job descriptions. This came through, if you remember budgeting, we talked about forming a budget for the IT department because we're going to create an IT department. I think Paul Rose and Keith worked on it to develop how this is going to be funded and to be funded from various departments based upon a number of IT devices in that department. So I don't know, Sergeant Jaremba, do you want to talk about this, or Keith, who wants to talk about it? Okay.
This was all in the original request from August, but there's been a few changes as we've gone forward with it, with departments being hit with this charge. We've had a few of them that have reduced the number of computers they have, and Darren and Justin have worked on keeping that list updated to me, because we'll need to know what that is when we actually start applying this charge. You already approved the creation of the fund, so we did that. We did the advance, because we're going to have expenditures starting here in December, and then the intention on the budget, which you approved, is to repay the advance over a couple or 3 years, depending on how things go. The changes, I guess Darren can address.
So the changes were mostly in volume counts of PCs at certain various departments, which changed the overall costs. But what we basically did was we created job descriptions. That was something we didn't have, so we added that in here for both the director position and the tech position. And we also explored and investigated and determined pay scales for those. As it was determined before, currently I'll just continually be paid out of the police department budget as long as I'm working for the city as the IT director, and then we'll be recreating this secondary position.
And, going through the budgets, we did the budgets for next year, and I guess we're going to have to modify the budgets going forward, of course, to address this issue, because most departments don't have the funds or additional funds necessary based upon the number of computers and laptops and tablets that they have to fund this going into the future. So,
Right, and especially over the 5 years. Like you had
Right.
mentioned, covering it out of carry forward, and most departments could probably do that for 1 year, but this is a fairly big hit consistently every year from
Yes.
now on.
so I think we're going to have to, going forward, specifically probably in 2024, the budgets are going to have to reflect an additional charge from each department showing, where the money's going to come from to cover this. Because I think we're going to have to, every department, based upon the number of computers and tablets that they have, will be different on the amount of the contribution. Since a city our size, we probably should have an IT, designated person department besides, Sergeant Zaremba from the police department doing this. I mean, at some point, computers are becoming more prevalent, right? So,
Really?
Mayor?
Thank you. So we set this up, just to review, we set this up the same as we have with the vehicle maintenance. So as vehicles come and go, then they're actually only charged, it's not the number of vehicles, it's the hours of service. And at times we have to raise the rates because parts become more expensive, the labor becomes more expensive just to cover, so it's a break even. Like our other revenue accounts are. So in this case, what we're looking to do is keep Darren under the so it does not adversely interfere with his pension. Keep him under the police payroll in his classification as sergeant, but he will fill the IT director. And at the point in time when he leaves, then we'll either bring somebody else in for the IT director, or the person that's the technician now would likely move up into that. We created the job description as required. We also had to determine a pay that was reasonable. We know that next door they just hired an IT person at the court to fill a vacancy. And that annual salary is around $60,000. But if you think about the number of computers over there, and then the limited hours and days of the week that they work versus what we do here at City Hall, where we have police and fire, and the rec for that matter, that it's a 24/7 operation, then it's a lot more responsibility. So after consulting with Darren, we were looking at a salary right around $65,000, and we also didn't want it to top out too high. Most of our salary ranges go from A through F for 6 steps. So to start at where we wanted, but have it not top out a great deal higher than that, start around 65 and top at about 75, we came up with a 92D, which is $65,270 a year. And then in 2024, it would go to the E step. And then in 2025, it would go to the F step and then be done. No further steps. And again, that's for the technician position. Now, I will tell you another justification for starting the technician at the D is he's been with us here in the city for a number of years. He was also at the schools for some years before that, and we're just trying to be fair with him, where he's not taking a reduction to switch him from the schools over to here, a reduction in benefits and years and whatnot. So that's how we put it together, and what we're asking is to start him at the 92D January 1st. So that'll be his step that whole year, and then the 2 steps the following 2 years. The other thing we'd like is to start him with 2 weeks vacation. I know we generally don't do that for somebody coming in, even if they do have experience and whatnot, but in this case, he's literally been in our building. It's just we haven't been paying him for it. And after one full year here, all the other employees get 2 weeks vacation, and we just feel that that's fair to him. Now, the other thing I'll tell you about the technician is he lives about 2 blocks from here, behind Claggett School, and he has and can respond to here for an emergency that takes somebody to physically be here, something with a dispatch, something that can't be done remotely. Darren and Harvey and Justin can do a lot of the stuff remotely as far as rebooting servers or this or that, but if something actually needs to be manually done physically here, no disrespect, Darren's done a great job for us, but it takes a lot longer to drive from Bay Village down than it does from 2 blocks away over. And Justin has filled those gaps for us, even though that's not in his job description, just to help the city out. So for those reasons is why I'm asking that we do this. I do agree with you, John, that we may have to review where the money's going to come from if we get by a year or 2 and then have to adjust. We may also find that as numbers of computers go up or down, then the charges aren't quite as much either. So.
Right, and I think we'll make the determination during the next budget process, but we're in a technology era, and we gotta. I don't think we should be behind the curve. We should be ahead of it a little bit, and so we have to do.
The other thing for the budget, and I mentioned it last time we talked about this, but I did want to just remind everybody. I mean, we're making an estimate of what this budget is, but we have no history to go on. So we may find as we go into this that we don't actually need everything we asked for, or we need more, and so that may change the way that budget goes too. Right. Since it's a new department, it's it's harder to project.
The first year would be the test year, so to speak, of where we fall at the end of 2023. It would be a pretty good guesstimate of how the future should go. I know technology keeps advancing, and maybe things will get more efficient or effective, or to make it more complicated. Who knows? Because usually it doesn't get easier; it gets harder. So we have to deal with that issue. Paul, you have anything to add?
No, I just want to thank Darren and Keith for their work on this, and any questions that you may have to get you over some humps, I'll be glad to help.
So does this mean that I think we're going to have to get Huber an iPad? I don't know.
He does?
Does he use it, or is it just?
Yeah. Has he logged on yet?
Does he know how to use it?
The flip phones may be out. I don't know.
Eventually, they're just going to stop making them, so he won't have a choice.
Yeah, they're going to stop making.
Yeah, I was going to say they're making flip phones again. They're advertising them.
What if something were to happen to that one?
God forbid I couldn't answer the phone.
So we'll have to deal with those issues as they arise. But I mean, that all kind of makes sense. Does it make sense to everybody else? Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-256, increase PO 2022-1506, Portable Water System LLC. Who's doing this one? I didn't get there yet. Is this
I'll take
Patrick?
it. We recently completed the repainting of the South Court Water Tower. While the water tower is being repainted, it had to be emptied. So as a matter of protection, backup for our system, we brought in these portable water systems with portable tanks. We estimated the length of time we'd need to have those, And unfortunately, the project took a little longer than we expected, so we need to cover the extra days that we were using them, increasing the PO from by $6,929 to a total of $21,870.
Questions?
Move to approve.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-257, MOU with the Cleveland Clinic for the Police Department. Chief Kenny?
Thank you, Mr. President. The law director suggested we bring this issue before the Finance Committee. We are requesting permission for the mayor and I to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the Cleveland Clinic Police Department authorizing limited police powers that they can exercise on their premises that they own out on East Washington Street, the Cleveland Clinic, Medina Hospital. The Ohio Revised Code requires hospital law enforcement agencies to enter into agreements with the local jurisdictions, the city police department, and we authorize which law enforcement authority they can exercise on their property. The current agreement that we have, the memorandum of understanding, delineates what authorities they have. Essentially, the police department will retain all investigative authority over misdemeanors and felonies. So it is a quite restrictive memorandum of understanding with the police department. Has been reviewed and approved by the law director, and we are requesting the emergency clause as they have some staffing issues they'd like to cover there.
When you say the Cleveland Clinic property, is it only the hospital property, or do they own other property within the city limits?
Currently, it's just the medical center and the hospital. So it's the campus on East Washington.
All right, any questions?
I will if I could.
Yeah, Mayor?
So we've been in discussion with them for, well, they asked me several years ago about bringing their police in, and I told them we weren't willing to do that, and that, we wanted our police to handle things. So then here of late, they asked their chief operating officer locally here, and their police chief and their administrative commander wanted to meet and talk about it, and really they weren't looking at taking over policing from the city of Medina, which was my fear. I mean, our officers know the prosecutors, know the courts, know what's expected. What they're looking at is there are times when an off-duty officer may be tied up somewhere else in the building or may not be available, may not have shown up that day. A shift wasn't filled. And then they get somebody with some mental health issues, and they have to tie up a full-time staff member to try to keep an eye on them, which is then delaying the service in the ER, emergency being the key word, that these folks can't help. So I told them I thought we could come to some reasonable resolution of them handling things like mental health, if it's somebody being violent and they need to detain them long enough to get us there, if we have to send our road people out. But I wanted our folks to be responsible for the investigation and filing all charges. I didn't want to take a chance of them filing charges. Things aren't up to either our standards or it's different than what they do in Cuyahoga County. And once we came to that agreement and everybody was good with it, then of course it had to go up through the legal folks at their end, through Mr. Huber, back and forth a couple times, and it just took us a little while to get here. They'd really like to implement it as soon as possible, so that's why the chief has asked for the emergency clause, and I respectfully ask for that as well.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Move to approve with the emergency clause.
Second, including the emergency clause.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 22-258, a zoning map amendment from an I-1 to an R3.
Mr. President,
Oh,
do you want to talk about Lafayette?
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry, Chief. I forgot you did mention that. So talk about Lafayette's going to be coming up at the next meeting, but the chief wants to introduce some of the ideas or the changes that may occur, so we're ready for it on the 12th. Go ahead, Chief.
I just want to give a heads up because we're on a little bit of a time crunch. Our policing contract with Lafayette Township expires December 31st. We've gone back and forth with some changes. We're waiting to see if the, number one, that the levy would pass. with a small increase for policing, as well as the township affirming that they were going to continue the relationship with the city police department. Both have happened. They voted unanimously to stay with the police department, and the levy did pass. So the only change with this upcoming contract, it'll be a 5-year contract. The only change is that instead of a pass-through, which in the past is generated between the high 200,000s to the low 300,000s, it will be a flat rate of 400,000 guaranteed by the contract with the township. So that will be coming at the next Finance Committee. And
So what the chief is saying is coming to the Finance Committee and the council meeting on the 12th, because the contract is terminates on December 31st.
Yeah.
And with that coming on the 12th, of course, the emergency clause has to be requested because it has to be made effective prior to January 1st of 2023. But it's the same contract as you mentioned, with the one modification of a flat fee rather than a floating fee.
yes, sir.
Everything else will remain the same. All the other obligations of both the township and the city basically is the same under the contract that it was previously. So just want to so if you have any questions, you can talk to the chief between now and the 12th, any specific issues you may have or questions. But as soon as he gets that out, he's going to circulate it to all of us so we can start looking at it.
Yeah, we have the final draft, so it should be going out soon.
Any questions on that? So we can make sure everybody's aware of it? Okay.
Thank you.
Chief. I'm sorry I forgot about that. So 22-258, a zoning map amended from an I-1 to an R3. Mr. Dutton?
Thank you. Yeah, this is an application to rezone 14.88 acres south of Lafayette Road, west of Industrial Parkway, from I-1 industrial to R3 high-density urban residential. The property is currently owned by Brookdale Mobile Home Park, is partially wooded, includes a small pond, and does not have any direct access to a city road right-of-way. So the current application is only the rezoning from the I-1 to I-3 and does not incorporate a specific use or plan. However, the applicant has indicated that their intent is to rezone the property and expand the existing Brookdale Mobile Home Park. You have in your packets the differences between the districts. Obviously, I-1 is industrial, so it's mostly industrial, some limited commercial and public uses. The R3 predominantly allows residential and public uses. So a mobile home park is a conditional use in the R3 district, which will require approval from the Planning Commission and a public hearing. There are also a number of standards that are specific to mobile home parks in the zoning code. It includes setbacks, screening, and specific location. So though the rezoning is the only thing being considered this time, the applicant has provided a concept plan showing 61 additional units which would come off the existing mobile home park. So if it does move forward, it will require a site plan as well from the Planning Commission. The fire department and engineering departments have both reviewed basically the rezoning, and the plan have indicated a need for a secondary access to the property if developed. The applicant has acknowledged this and are working on a secondary access point for emergency access from Industrial Parkway. I'll note the comprehensive plan, which was recently adopted, promotes the need for a mix of housing options at a higher density along major corridors. This rezoning to R3 could accomplish all three of those things. The rezoning was heard by the Planning Commission at their November 10th meeting. They unanimously recommended the rezoning be approved. Staff's recommendation is also approval of the rezoning. I found it's compatible with the area, which is a transition between single-family residential to the west and industrial to the east. The application is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and the site plan and administrative review processes will sufficiently address the impacts of development in the R3 zoning district. Thank you.
Thank you. As full disclosure, I'll have to abstain on this proposal as I represent Jim Houck in all of his transactions, not only in Medina County, but other counties. So I cannot partake and vote on anything, so just so everybody knows. Any questions?
Yeah, I guess my biggest concern is that it's in Ward 4, going to be right up next to industrial properties. I know it's light industrial right now, but I struggle with the fact that our other housing development that's right next to Carlisle, I continually get concerns from the residents about the noise. I don't think anything on Industrial Parkway is second and third shift right now, but Carlisle eventually changed and became second and third shift. So, and I guess I say to council, I mean, we sat here on a piece of property with Sealy and we didn't rezone that from industrial to residential. So I guess I'm struggling with this rezoning. It doesn't seem consistent to what we've done in the past or the concerns we've had.
And I think that's a fair concern. There would be a screening or a buffer required from the residential to the west and the industrial to the east. And there's also the fact that this property is basically landlocked. There's really not a viable industrial use for the property without access to really any city right away. But there's certainly that conflict between districts that will happen at some point, on the zoning map.
Any other questions? Bill?
I have talked to people in that area who have homes contiguous to, noise issues. And I think Jim makes a good point. I mean, when we did the comprehensive plan, we recognized the need for more housing and multi-unit housing apartments. But the industrial areas will end up being the industrial area, and considering the number of people that have raised issues with noise, and frequently you can say, well, it's just too bad because you knew it was there when you got the development. But those terms that we use about there will be a buffer zone, or there will be this space, frequently that doesn't really resolve the issue, and sometimes maybe it's not even in place. I don't know. But I think when we consider this, I think we have to always keep in mind that we want the expansion, we want more housing, we like more industry, but the most important thing we always have to think about, I think, is residents themselves and the issues that any of these changes we make can complicate or compound.
Any other questions? Bob?
I just have one comment from the planning meeting. Two of the commission members did express the noise concern, as was brought here, and they do believe that right now it's basically a flat, empty field, so the noise has very little to stop. It's just going to flow from place to place. But with these buffers, no, nothing's perfect, but we can reduce or just reduce the impact of any noises that may be there coming through. And so I'm fairly certain that we will get something that is agreeable as far as a noise buffer going.
Other questions?
I have a question.
Bill?
So if we are going to get something agreeable with regard to the noise buffer, what exactly would that be? And where would it be?
It could be a combination of, or any of a fence or landscaping or an increased setback or a combination or mounding, any of those things that would really need to be something we need to get into on the site plan process, but they kind of have options on how they could provide that.
And do any of those things really actually reduce the noise? I mean, let's consider it's an industrial noise. Mm-hmm. Do they really? If you put up a fence, will that reduce the noise?
I think it could reduce it. It's not going to, buffer it completely where you're not going to hear any noise. That's not going to happen. That's not the purpose of a buffer. It's to reduce it and make it a little bit more compatible.
I mean, I'm thinking of some issues that have been raised by residents with regard to noise that happened in the middle, noise in the middle of the night, mm-hmm. noise early in the morning, noise on the weekend, that deal with that issue now. And it seems to me that if we made these changes, we would want to have a clearer idea of exactly how you would reduce that noise. Exactly what would it be, and how much would it really reduce the noise? This may not be compatible, but for 45 years I lived on South Court Street, and I planted a whole buffer of trees and bushes and shrubs, and I would swear on the Bible, I don't know that I ever reduced one single iota of noise, and that was just traffic, right?
And I believe we have the applicants here tonight if you have any questions directly for them.
No, I just have questions about the issue itself. Okay. I don't have any, I have specific questions about noise buffers because, as Councilman Shields pointed out, people on the planning commission, I think, don't get the phone calls, but those are phone calls that we get.
And I guess I understand the concerns, but as far as specifics, we're not going to get there at this phase because it's a rezoning. We're just changing that map and you're leaving it in the hands of staff and the planning commission to find an appropriate buffer. So getting 100%, this is what it's going to be. That's not where we're at in the process, but those are certainly heard.
Jess?
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess my thoughts are, Mr. Lamb, the Farmers Exchange apartments have quite the noise next to them, but they are fully occupied. And also, I mean, even on my street, my neighbor at the bed and breakfast absolutely hates the fact that Route 18 gets their exercise pump-up music going very early in the morning, but it's within the confines of the noise ordinance. So we already know what doesn't work, and those are two examples of things. The railroad's kind of an issue in and of itself, but we know what doesn't work. So if we have the owners here this evening, I guess I would ask them, would you be willing to do not necessarily above and beyond, but something beyond what we know doesn't work?
Absolutely. We want the residents to be happy as well. We're not here trying to make things difficult. We're more than willing to...
Microphone, John?
Yeah, Mr. Howe, can you go to the back, the rear microphone where Ms. Patton is there back there? And that way everybody that's watching on TV could hear you.
Hi, Jim Hauk. Yes, absolutely. We're willing to work with you guys on a good way to reduce the noise. One question I would have, do you have a noise ordinance, and would that area be exempt from the noise ordinance at 3 in the morning, or is the industrial part of the current noise ordinance?
That is an excellent question. Can
We have a
anyone
noise
answer
ordinance.
that? I know we have a noise ordinance, but
Whether
I don't
it's
know.
ever enforced, though, would probably be a question because it's very difficult to enforce.
Yeah, so I don't think that we have to go as far as a turnpike where the large concrete barriers are put up between the traffic in residential neighborhoods. But I'm thinking some type of mounding. So we'll work with our engineers and we will work with Medina on coming up with a satisfactory plan to address that noise. And if we can't, then we won't proceed with the project.
Mayor?
The noise ordinance is about sound amplifying devices from either multiple residents, vehicles, and that it is enforced. I can't tell you how many tickets I wrote for it. It's regularly enforced. Even if we get, the law says 60 feet from the source of the sound, I would measure 200 feet, 180 to 200 feet, and be able to hear the car before it got there. So those were the types of tickets we were taking routinely over to municipal court. And with the scanner in my office, I hear the officers continuing to enforce that. There's not a regulation for industrial noise because industry creates noise. Therefore, back to where we started, that we have to be very cautious of the proximity of residential units anywhere near the industry because the industry is going to be noisy. Some are more noisy than others. Some can be contained or controlled through cooperation with the people running the particular industry, such as when we had the concrete grinding complaints, such as when they were unloading the rail cars with vibrators close to residential areas. More recently now with Carlisle Brake and Friction building further to the east when they moved the Oklahoma operations to the city of Medina. The fact of the matter is that was always industrial land. It's just the building wasn't quite that close when those folks built their houses or bought their houses, and now it is. But it's all very legal and not restricted by our ordinances in any fashion. Now, most of the owners that we've worked with, if they were like dumping metal at an industrial location, for example, into a steel bin at 2 or 3 in the morning, that sound is going to reverberate pretty far because there's nothing to contain it. So simply by having conversations with people about those things, and let's wait till 7 a.m., 8 a.m., some more reasonable hour than every shift going out there and dumping things like that. And we've gotten good cooperation. We got good cooperation with Osborne to build a mound and crush, I believe, during certain hours. Andrew, that might have been before you got here, though. There was some limitation on the crushing. We had the same thing with Osborne. They built a mound and then had, I think, some sort of tall trees at the top so that the ground would absorb some of it, and if it tried to come up over the mound, that the trees would then catch some more of it. It's not going to be as quiet as living in the center of a residential area with no industry around. It's simply not possible. But I think we're doing at least a reasonable and fair job with it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I mean, I know this is not a binding contract because you're in front of us saying this at this finance committee meeting, but a lot of times I find like the people don't want to invest the money on building these things like the buffers. So you're saying that you would be willing to do, again, not necessarily above and beyond, but more than what we currently have in place for these other issues that they're talking about.
Absolutely. As I stated, we want the residents that are living in the community to be happy as well. The last thing we want to do is go through all the time and trouble of building something and get the phone calls that you guys get. We get the same phone calls and we take them seriously. And so we want to address that so it's not an issue. And yes, we will work to address that.
Thank you.
Danny?
Yeah, I just want to tack on to what Jess said. It sounds to me like the ownership that is going to be taking control of this has made a commitment to the city and to the people that will be moving in there that they'll do everything in there that's possible. And again, as the mayor said and Bill said and Jim said, you're not going to eliminate all the noise, but you can I mean, I think if people are going to move into that area, they're going to see that there's industry close by, so they maybe I feel comfortable with the rezoning right now. Thank you.
Any other comments?
No, I one last comment. I appreciate you being here. I'm not trying to be against this because it's been a great residence there, and I'm thankful for the housing development there, and I'm happy to have more of that housing. I guess I wanted it on the record that as the council person for that ward, I do end up getting calls about the noise from the industrial area, so I kind of wanted to make sure we got that on the record early on, that this will be a concern and something that I know I want to make sure that I voice the concern for the residents in that area.
Absolutely, and we appreciate it. We want to know how to make the community as good as we can make it.
Thank you.
Mr. Coyne, one more question.
Yes, Mayor.
Sir, while you're at the microphone there, we've got a map here kind of showing the block of land, and it shows that it accesses that industrial road. Do you own that now, or would that have to be acquired?
So we own the land that you have to get through the park. I don't know if we could bring up the picture, but where we were showing the access was I spoke with that landowner about purchasing an easement for emergency vehicles and emergency traffic. If there was a fire and the front area was blocked or it couldn't be accessed that way, to have the secondary means.
Matt, are you able to bring that up? By any chance? No?
No.
Oh, sorry. He cannot. Okay.
Okay, so you don't currently own that, though?
No,
Okay.
we own the industrial land, and that piece of it, I've been in conversations about not buying the land, buying an easement through that land.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Mr. President?
Reggie?
So if we don't pass this, would you take that as an opportunity to investigate what this border would consist of and then represent it?
I mean, yeah, it was presented to me that before our engineers for our engineers to continue, I think we're going to have a lot of meetings about the border and about the use of the land before this is a step to be able to present a formal concept plan. What we did is we had them draw up a concept plan that wasn't required for this meeting, but I want you to have an idea of what we're doing. And then we have to go back to the engineers and have them, once this is approved, they start actually going through a much more detailed plan. And in that plan is where we would work with the city, is my understanding. Andrew could probably answer it better. But I believe that we're going to have to come back in front of several boards with that plan to show what we're doing and get approval, because we're a conditional use in that area. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's correct. It will need to go back to the planning commission for site plan review, where they'll see the detailed site layout, landscaping, screening, lighting, all those aspects, and it will require another public hearing before the planning commission.
I do tend to agree with Mr. Lamb on the sounds. In my neighborhood, I regularly hear the industry from my house. And yeah, I've had a few complaints about the noise. I think I've become used to it since I've lived there for a number of years. But I suspect that there are people that, yeah, they're going to drive around the neighborhood to determine if that's a place they want to live, but I don't believe they have that full understanding of what the sound level is going to be. You know, they're going to learn a whole lot as they live there, but I certainly know that those noises travel.
And I'm sure they do. Where our land is located, a significant number of the homes in Brookdale right now back up to that area. And quite frankly, that is not something that we've had any complaints about. And again, the concern to us is if there is a change in industry in that area, we can address it now, and we will address it at planning and through our engineers to make sure that there is something done. If you pass this today, we'll come with a plan that shows a sound barrier and how we're going to achieve it. And we're more than willing to work with you guys on something like that.
Well, just for clarification also, I mean, as Kathy just alerted me, I mean, of course, we have to have a public hearing on this also. I mean, so it's coming through finance, and there's going to be a public hearing on it, and then it'll have to go to council. So, I mean, there's still a couple other steps that we need to do as a council, because it just can't go from finance to council because of the requirement of a public hearing. So, just so everybody's aware of that. Okay. So I think if I'm correct, tonight, if we do anything, it'll be moving it forward, I guess, to the next step, which will be a public hearing. So that's what we'd be doing, or you'd be doing.
I'll make a motion then to proceed forward with this first step of the process here to take it to a public hearing.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Aye. Did you get that, Kathy?
Kathy doesn't miss a thing.
It was 6 yeas, 1 abstention. Yeah, yeah. Jim Shields made the motion, Denny seconded it. 6 yeas, 1 abstention. Okay, thank you. Okay, 22-259, a room tax for hotels, motels, and other transient stays. Mr. Rose brought this up.
Right. Thank you, Mr. President. As everybody knows, we've got a hotel possibly in our future. There's still a lot of T's that have to be crossed and I's that have to be dotted from the developer's end. But I think it would be prudent on this council's part to investigate the possibilities of putting in a room tax. This particular RCA needs to be amended slightly in that we are limited to 3%. It would be a total of 6%, 3% for the county, 3% for the city, so a total of 6%. So just I'll make that amendment. The information that I provided you in an email over the weekend shows the Ohio Revised Code 5739.08 that gives us the authority to do that. And then there's a lot of other, how do I want to say, wherefores and therefores and exceptions that I would ask that Keith and Greg review just to make sure that we can do what it sounds like we can do, that there aren't some, like with the county, Mr. Miller did respond to me this morning. They do have a 3% tax for the county, and with that, there's some exceptions, so we just want to make sure we're not crossing any of those paths. Just for illustration, I did provide some potential dollars with a 75-room hotel. The maximum annual capacity, if every night every room was full, which we know is not going to happen, there's 375 rooms, if you will. Using Mr. Gersbacher's 68%, we got about 18,600 nights. And that's a potential at a 3% rate of 83,700 for the city in extra income that can be used, as I understand it, and I will rely on Keith and Greg to let us know for sure we can use for the general fund or economic development or, other things that are necessary for the city. So I bring this to council for review. There are there's more information that I think we need to have before we can make that final decision. But maybe we can have a...
Yeah, one of my questions, I'm just thinking about it, is how many other hotels or motels are in the city now? I think there's a few.
We get, and Paul had asked about this, so we get about $1,000 a year in lodging tax now. We don't have any of this permissive lodging tax that Paul's talking about, but the state has a tax that they charge, and they give us a portion of it. I don't know how their formula works. We just get a check from the state. It's about $1,000 a year. I only know of two, the Town Motel and the one down on Lafayette.
There's two. But Paul's, I think this, what I read is this includes bed and breakfasts, which I guess would also then be Airbnbs. The two hotels that are here now, we have never considered this for.
Well, it's probably not enough money to be worth talking about. I mean, I don't know that they're so much smaller. I can't imagine it'd be that much money, but I don't, that might be why.
Right, that might be why. If we were to, there's good reason for the proposal that Councilman Rose made, but if we were to do this, this would apply to those hotels as well? It would, and then if we included bed and breakfasts, of which there are
two or three that I'm aware of.
Two or three, and then I guess it would include Airbnbs, which I'm not sure
I know there's one.
how many
in the square,
Airbnbs.
but-
I know there's more than one because I
Yeah.
looked for somebody for one.
Well, how do you keep track of that? I guess the other question, how do you...
Airbnb keeps track of it on their own, but I don't know how. I don't know if Airbnb is taxed as a hotel.
Are they required?
I mean, I
to
had
share
one, and
that?
I'm not really sure that we paid.
I have no idea.
Yeah,
And
so I think-
but I don't think, and this is my reading of the code, I don't think that we would be collecting this tax regardless. My understanding is, and the example I used when I was explaining this to Paul is like the motor vehicle license tax. We get motor vehicle license tax from the state without doing anything. Then in addition to that, council has imposed a motor vehicle license tax that's permissive that the council imposed, but the finance department does not collect that. The state collects that when they do the registrations, they send it to us. All we do in finance is book it. And my understanding of lodging taxes, it would work the same way. So all these questions about like Airbnbs and that, I think that would all be this, at least my impression is that would be the state's problem because they'd be the one collecting it. Because if we were collecting, I have no idea how to collect from Airbnb because how would you know, if you rented your house on Airbnb, how would I know that? I have no idea.
In some communities, you have to register with the county. In some counties, you have to register with the county for the tax. But I'm not sure if they changed their formula. I don't know if they changed the policy rather, and Airbnb does that now. I don't know. It just looks like an interesting thing that we would need to look further into.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess the point is, how much money we're going to be generating, is it worth generating, and what are you going to use it for, right? The county collects 3% right now for everything, and they give it back to the Visitors Bureau. I think that's what
Right.
you mentioned.
Right.
So that would occur here also. Is that beneficial to us? I mean, what are we gaining? What are we trying to do? I guess is the point. I know you're trying to generate additional revenue, but the question that I would ask is, when we get that additional revenue, what are we going to do with it?
Want a list? Okay, well, first,
I mean, there's a lot of lists, but I guess
first
the
thing that
question is,
came to my mind is Jared's department. He's losing his funding because of the what's that? The fee that they collect. More and more people are moving away from cable TV, but there is a very needed and favored service that his department provides. We could use some of these funds to fund that, to help fund that, would be one area. Economic development for the city itself, and bringing, we tie in together with the County Tourist Bureau of Tourism for the city tourism. There's another option. There's many things that we could use to use this money for to help us along. And we know that the general fund is getting a little on the light side too. We could use it for that.
let me ask you another question real quick.
Go ahead.
Since we have the JED, would this, I don't know the answer at the top of my head, would this, if it passes in the city, does this have to be adopted by the JED, or is it automatically included in the JED? Because we do have hotel in the JED in Montville. Do you know the answer? I don't know the answer at the top of my head.
Know any cities that have one in a JED, so that'd be a Gregor.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it just becomes part of it or does not become part of it. Or does it have to be adopted by it to be applicable to it? That's the only question, I mean, because we do have one hotel in the JED in Montville. And
Well,
I don't know.
that is a good question, because the JED follows the city income tax rules. So if we're now implementing another tax, the JED board's going to have to meet and talk about that. I guess that is a good question to see if they're already paying. I would assume they're paying the 3% to the county. But
My suggestion would be, I mean, Paul, I think it's a great request, but as Keith said, who's going to collect it? I think we need the answer to that. And, I mean, the answers, the questions that need to be answered are about the Airbnbs, the two smaller motels that's in the city. How are we going to regulate that? Who's going to be responsible for notifying? Is it notifying the city? Is it notifying the state? I think those are the questions. I mean, we could always use the money. I mean, especially if we're not the ones that have to do any of the legwork. You know what I mean? I mean, if the state's doing the legwork and just mailing us a check, yeah, I would be in favor of it. But I think those are some of the questions that we need to answer before we go any further.
Yeah, I like the idea, Paul, because I certainly have spent enough money in other states in my travels at hotels, and I've paid my fair share of those taxes. But I, too, would wonder what the cost is for this.
Right. And that was my question to Keith, that very thing. Is it going to be worth it? So I'll dig into these things. I'll be leaning on Keith.
Yeah, and I'll call Independence. That's the one, the only city I know of, that a small city like us, other than the big ones, that makes enough lodging tax to even notice it, is Independence, because they have all the hotels at 77 and 480. So I called him when you first asked me about this, but I didn't get into the specifics on this.
Medina Township, they're collecting it.
I would assume well, I'll call Independence because I know they collect a lot. but I don't know if they are collecting it. I don't think they are. I think they're getting it from the state, but I can find that out from them for sure.
But I think we still have time, which is the good thing.
Yeah, we do have time.
But we should probably get the questions, and if there's any others that come up, you can ask. Jess, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a couple questions. So, Councilman Rhodes, the numbers that you proposed, that 83,000 roughly, is just from the single hotel?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So is there a way, and I'm asking because I'm thinking outside the box, I have no idea if this is possible, that we can limit that tax only applies to hotels that have, can do this much occupancy. That way we wouldn't be affecting these smaller places, because that's a big extra chunk for them to pay, even though it doesn't seem like a lot. I mean, I'm sure you can tell just exterior improvements, that there's not a ton of money to be spent on things like that. So if there's a way we could do that, like some of the smaller ones are exempt, and that would eliminate the Airbnbs and all of those things. But also, if we have to include everyone and we have to include the Airbnbs, is Airbnb even required to tell us who in our city is actively using their service and renting their place out? I mean, it would have to be the honor system, I guess, or we'd have to put in place something that would require you to register. As far as collecting the funds, it sounds like the county gets a portion already, correct? No matter what we do. So why wouldn't we just have the county auditor collect our share as well while they're doing it, and then just pass it to us?
Okay, I can look into that too.
But I think that Keith mentioned before, the Ohio Revised Code says that the state will be collecting this.
I'm not sure that the county's collecting it either. I think they're getting it
Okay.
from the state, but I'll check on that and we'll see. Because if it's just the state, then that answers a lot of these questions about, is this going to cost us any
Yeah.
money? And like I said, I assume that it's all state, but I really don't know because none of the cities have worked with collect enough to care.
Even if it is the state collecting right now, it just makes sense to me that whoever is currently collecting that would just collect it all, and it wouldn't be a problem to just split it, our portion off.
I agree. That's why I assume that's how it works, but I'm not positive on that because I read the code and I don't know. There's a lot of words in there that I didn't.
All right, well, let's get some more information on that, so the next meeting we can have
I
some.
just want to make one other comment. I did talk to Mr. Rose tonight before the meeting, but one of the things I've learned from the school is those two smaller hotels, that's kind of a lifeline sometimes for families that are down and out, and that's what keeps them here in the community, keeps their children in school. And I guess I just want to be sensitive to charging another tax on the people who
Yep.
stay at those two hotels is going to be a huge impact on those families. So I don't want people to think those two hotels are just, hey, somebody's in Medina for a night or two.
No,
A
they're
lot of it
not.
is truly families. It's their only option they have, and that's what keeps them here in Medina. And it's usually driven by their children being in the school district. So I just want you to keep that in mind about those two smaller hotels. I told Mr. Rose I struggle a little bit adding any more taxes to those two facilities.
I would agree. People in recovery or in the reentry process often use those hotels too. So from having to place people at the hotels, I do know that, I mean, sometimes there's even a waiting list.
That is very true. It usually is very hard to get any additional families in that need to stay there, but there are definitely families in those hotels that are staying there. And that's our only option at the time.
And thank you for educating me today, Mr. Shields. And that's something that if we can do that, we can work something out here for those folks.
Okay, so Keith, call your contacts at Independence.
I'll call him tomorrow and check on the collection just to confirm that it's the state. And that answers most of the questions. As far as being able to exempt hotels, I have no idea. I don't know.
See if you can find anything out from them. Maybe they know the answer. Maybe they tried from Independence.
I doubt it. I think they want as much money as they
Oh,
can
okay.
get, but-
See if anybody has any answers to that. Okay, then, Mr. Rose, you had the next one, which is 22-260, review and update parking policy in a historic district.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, the hotel brought to light the potential parking issue that we have here in town. And with the way it's worded in the hotel park, or the historic district parking zone 1, I believe it's what it's called, where they, parking is not required to be added. Well, we found out how we can be bit by that with the hotel coming in and the Farmers Exchange being moved from a, in and out to people coming and staying, living there, people coming and spending the evening for dinner and entertainment. And I would like to work with the engineering department and whomever to come up with a number that says, okay, and let's use the Gardener's Cottage, for example, where when the back wall collapsed, we were fortunate in they were able to rebuild it, the business didn't change. But if that would have collapsed to the point where it had to be torn down, and then something else come in, and say the property owner decided they want to put in an apartment building, okay, for example, well, that would strain our parking. But in that parking zone 1 that we have, they wouldn't be required to add any new parking. So I'd like to make this parking restriction or parking zone a little more flexible so that if a property substantially changes in use, there is an out for the city to require maybe not, 10 parking spaces per whatever, but maybe 2 or 3 per whatever, cubic square or square foot used or whatever, so that we can reduce the strain on the parking in the future. And I know, Mr. Coyne, you and I have had that conversation about, well, we're going to be coming up with autonomous automobiles. And I says, not in our lifetime. And then thinking back, as I was putting up the Christmas tree, I remembered back when I was a kid, my dad had this magazine that put out by General Motors that showed people in 1990 riding in cars, playing cards while the car was running on this track, okay, and going from point A to point B. Back in the 60s, they envisioned that happening in the 90s. Okay, here we are 30 years beyond that, and it still ain't here. So I don't think we're going to be as autonomous automobiles as you would like in our lifetime anyway. Okay, so.
Well, I think
Thank you.
that's one of the questions, too. The other question is just remember that we're probably the only city in the state of Ohio our size that has 2 parking decks. And I guess you're right, with the growth of our square and the attraction that we draw from all over Northeast Ohio and other states because of the different businesses we have in the square itself, parking does become a premium. And, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know, is a 3rd parking deck in the future? I have no idea. But, we have managed pretty well so far.
Yes, we have.
On how to use, vertical parking rather than surface parking to solve some of our problems. But it's expensive. And we try to solve the problems with that. But, I don't know the answer to that either. I don't know if, what other cities do, Andrew, or what you've seen, or what problems that we can solve. But what are your thoughts?
I mean, in my opinion, cities in our situation with historic downtowns our size typically have ordinances like this where you don't need to provide the parking. If you think about Gardner's Cottage, where would they get the parking from? It's basically the entire property is the footprint. By my count, we have over 1,000 public parking spaces in the square area. Maybe they're not distributed correctly, but in my opinion, it's more that maybe we need to invest in additional parking or ideas or shared parking. That's the way it's done in a lot of downtowns, whether it's purely public financed or maybe it's a hotel tax that maybe that's where the money goes is for the parking or something like that. So I think there's different ways to do it, but in my opinion, keeping this requirement facilitates development instead of having a hindrance where they're scrambling to find parking spots somewhere where the land just doesn't exist.
Danny?
And I hate to keep bringing this up because I think it's a good idea, Paul, but I still think the bottom line, if you go to any other, maybe not cities our size, but if you go to a larger city, unless you use valet parking, chances are you're not going to park close to any business that you want to go to, unless it's one of the federal buildings or something, or the business is close to a parking deck. We're just not used to that. As I said before, I've drove around the square 2 or 3 times trying to find a parking spot in front of the store that I want to go to.
So we don't have a parking problem, we have a walking problem.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I don't know if it's, granted on the candlelight walk, yeah, parking's at a premium and there's not enough parking. But all the other times of the year, except for some of the festivities that we have, I don't think it's that there's not enough ample parking. I think it's just people want to park closer to where either by necessity because they can't walk or they don't want to walk. Look at, how many people go to a mall. If they still go to a mall, they'll drive around, again, trying to find a parking spot close to the entrance that they want to go into instead of walking. But I think this is a good idea. I agree with Andrew, parking's at a premium. I don't know in our tenure if we're ever going to see another parking deck being constructed, but you never know.
Right.
But that's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks, Phil. I guess, Reggie?
Well, the comments that I have received with the possible hotel on the square is twofold. One is the increased traffic on the square. And then second of all is the lack of parking. So it's a huge concern. So I certainly agree that we do need additional parking. I'm not going to disagree with you. I've driven around the square multiple times looking for a spot. There's sometimes I will just walk from my home to the square because I don't want to have to deal with finding a parking spot.
Even though you probably could find one in the parking decks.
Well, I'd have to find, I could, but I know where they are.
Right.
We have visitors to our community that they're not real familiar for where our parking is. And what makes me sad is knowing that we have people that may live in Rittman or Wadsworth or Lodi or wherever, that when we have events on our square, as much as they'd love to come and participate in them, some of them are like, I drove through the square, it was a madhouse, I couldn't find parking, and I just kept going. And that's unfortunate because we, as a city, we lose out from, the opportunity for people to come and visit, obviously spend their money. So I do agree that the parking is something we need to investigate. Thank you.
Bill?
I respectfully disagree. I think parking is frequently used as a straw man. It's like, this is the problem that we have, is we just don't have enough parking. Andrew's right. Many years I have counted, as I've heard these arguments since the 1980s, like we must have more parking. And this is long before we had a parking deck. It was never that we needed more parking. It was better use of space we had and parking that we had, which we still do have. Shared space is one of the things that if you really observe a lot of the area by buildings, if they shared space, if you go behind Medina Hardware, number of different property owners, and there was a developer here years back who tried to get all those owners together and offered to pave that parking to make it one unified lot. There was plenty of space, it just wasn't being shared. As far as it being a curse to have not enough parking when people come here, I view it as a blessing. I mean, I think I've walked a mile to try to get someplace I wanted to go to. I think it's great that people are when they crowd in here. And we have wayfaring signs to find these parking lots that we have, and we've probably done more than hardly any community our size with parking decks and signage to direct people where to go. I have disagreed from the very beginning on the issue of the hotel and the addition of this making the traffic issue or a parking issue. I don't know how many thousands of cars are on the streets in this city every hour of the day. And if 68 of those, if 50 of the rooms or 40 of those rooms had occupancy in the new hotel, and added 40 more cars or 50 more cars, you would never know, we would never know the difference. Parking is always something you can find, no matter how hard it is to find. And it's a sign of a thriving place when maybe you've got to look a little for that parking. I think it's the last thing we need to do. I always thought it was a fallacy, and I've heard it for 40 years about parking. There are many other things we need to attend to address without going back to parking. And Andrew's exactly right. I mean, there's no way you can take a business on the square, and if the building was changed from a commercial retail business to an apartment, where would you put the parking? There is no place to put that parking. And fair is fair. And I think people that come here and want to have a business, regardless of what it is, they are here because they know they can make money. This is a successful community. And our attention always needs to be focused on that. That's my opinion.
Well, we heard varying opinions. I don't know where we go from here.
Mr. President. I remember talking with Art during the comprehensive planning process, and one of the things that he had done was when he had his open houses at Cool Beans, he had asked an associate of his who was from out of town not familiar with Medina at all, he said, hey, meet me at Cool Beans and park in the parking deck. And that's all he told them. And she said she had no problem finding the parking deck. She had no problem finding Cool Beans. So if we're going to invest in something, I have always said what Councilman Rose said is that we don't have a parking problem. We have a walking problem. So maybe we work on wayfinding signs or making the area more walkable, increase walkability. Maybe we designate more spots for those that are unable, they have mobility issues, so that they don't have to worry about finding a parking spot. But, I agree with Councilman Rose, we're not, and I'm sorry, I don't remember who brought up the point, but we're not used to having to walk a little bit to get to where we want to go. And that's very common in lots of places, and I don't see a problem with, I don't think we need to add more parking. I think if we're going to invest in anything, it would be wayfinding signs or increasing walkability.
All right, so I guess the question is, Paul request is to, if you're going to add a new business or building downtown, we have to figure a way to determine a limit of parking, which I hear most of you guys saying we don't want that.
Well, okay, but my thought behind this was that, okay, if you have a business that's going in, if you have like a gift store being replaced by a candy store, no parking problem. Okay, but if you have a gift store being replaced by a restaurant, there might be a strain on the parking, and maybe in a situation like that, we may want to look at, okay, yeah, maybe you have to add one or two more parking places somehow to facilitate. So we're not straining the existing thing, the existing parking, and we're not hurting the existing businesses that are staying here. Because that was one of the biggest cries that I heard from the Farmers Exchange people, was that they have people calling and canceling their dinner reservation at the time because they can't find a parking place close by. And granted, I agree, that's a good problem to have, but I'm not disagreeing with that. But by the same token, that does hurt the business because they were anticipating selling 2, 3, 4, 5 dinners for that, and now they're not. That's all.
I don't think people are aware that Castle Noel is a public lot.
But, so.
Well, I guess the question is, where do we want to put this? Because we're not going to solve this problem at the Finance Committee meeting.
Right.
Right.
So, this may be a question that may be a special legislation issue. I don't know, because you got to change the code, right? If you want to change something, you have to change the zoning code.
Is it changing the zoning code, or is it changing the downtown park district number 1?
I suppose it would be a change to the zoning code. That's where the regulation is, where it exempts the downtown from the parking requirement, and it references the parking district.
Okay. All right.
Next. Bill, you have a question?
Well, I guess so. We'd have to discuss this with a lot more clarity, about what's possible, what's not possible, but I think the law director just left. Yeah, I can understand that. I'm just thinking, to change the zoning code would then be, it would be a hit or, it would be, I'm not sure how you change a zoning code if you have a retail walk-in business that then, if it became a different business, you would have to provide some other parking. I don't know how that plays out, but I think that what's interesting to me about the issue is, back to that comment about shared parking, and I thought the wayfaring signs were fairly obvious to me about how, but I live here, so maybe not, but a directional, I guess, would be good. But the shared parking to me has always been the most fascinating, because there is so much flat, open space when you really look in the 9-block district that is so ineffectively being used. And I don't know who just mentioned it, but I think people sometimes don't have any idea, even though it's signed, the Castle Noel parking lot. Right. That's a public park, that's open to the public. And Farmers Exchange is an issue, though. the people that went into Farmers Exchange to put a restaurant and to put the businesses in there, they knew exactly what the size of that parking, they knew that space when they went in. It isn't like they didn't have any idea how much space you were going to have, and I live there, and I know the parking issues that they have, but people still do seem to pour in there anyway. But I think when you know going in, it's hard to consider that as being a problem, because you, as a business person, you would probably look at that before you started your business and come up with a way that you could accommodate it.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, I guess the question is, to get more information from Andrew and Paul, I think maybe this is best in special legislation, because this is a whole zoning change that'll have to
And
occur.
we're both on, so maybe that'd be a good place for
Okay.
us to have the discussion.
So
then.
Kathy, if we can move this to special legislation, they would love to have it, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
And I have a comment too. So Bill, based on what you've said, there are possible additional parking spots off of the square that I wasn't even aware of. So I think that's part of this problem, is that there's options that we don't know about, or not everybody knows about. And again, I go back to my comment that people who are not from this area don't know of the additional parking that they could find. So I think that needs to be brought out.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, yeah.
And I was just going to add, too, I know Bill talked about this in the 80s on that lot. I sat on a committee in the 90s that involved uptown businesses, the chamber, the city. We all came together and looked at the area and came up with ideas like there are spots, and I think maybe we need to get some of those people together again and talk about how do we get the word out there. I'll tell anybody that wants to go to Farmers Exchange, you can park at Garfield Elementary School from 4 o'clock at night until, the next morning when school starts. It's a very short walk from Garfield over to, but there's a huge parking lot behind Garfield. There are lots of places if people will just walk a little bit and look for it.
Absolutely, yeah.
But maybe we need to do a better job of getting that, publicizing that again, and reminding people other places to park.
Yep. So special legislation it is.
Thank you.
22-261, amend salaries and benefits code 3103, pay scales for 23, 4, and 5. I bet this comes from the negotiations.
This is to match what we anticipate the union contracts will be. The emergency clause is requested so that it's effective, so we don't have to do a retroactive pay. And we are very happy that the union contracts are done early enough that we're doing this before the year end, because I guess the best way I can explain that is if you walk into the finance department and say the word retro, you should probably duck, because people will throw things at you. It's just not fun for us.
Has this been agreed upon yet, or this is what we anticipate?
This is what we anticipate, and I think we're pretty much done. I guess the mayor will be the one to answer that.
Yeah, the attorneys and business representative for all 4 unions have said that it's acceptable. It's now just getting down to the language to interpret. The wages are not an issue at all. There are other things that were talked about, like looking at 1 week for overtime issues, whereas finance has been doing it over a 2-week period. And that worked okay with the 10-hour shifts, because it was all within that, but the 12-hour shifts makes it a little bit more challenging. But we're just going to have to find a way. Contractually, if it says that if you work an extra shift in the first 40-hour period or week period, then you're owed overtime whether you use a sick day in the second week or not. And right now, the way that's being looked at is they're looking at the 80-hour week and penalizing them versus the other. But we agreed at some of those small points. Another one was the waiving the first step of the dispatch, because we're having such a hard time getting dispatchers. And in the survey that was done, and from the OPPA, from CERB, our starting pay is significantly lower at our dispatch. So by waiving that A step, then B becomes it turns into 5 steps instead of 6 steps, and then we can likely keep those positions filled more easily. So little things like that we talked about, but we weren't going to change uniform allowance. We weren't going to change, adding money for a CDL operator, things like that. It was going to be pretty basic.
Okay, so I guess the good thing is that once you get the revised revenue sheets and impact on the budgets it'll have, we can make a determination on allocation of income tax, because this will have like an additional 1.5% impact of what we anticipated, which would still be about $180,000 difference then
Well, but it compounds.
okay, yeah, right, it compounds each year.
Right.
So that'll help us make a determination of what we have to do, because some of the budgets are going to change now with this impact of the 1.5% change above and beyond what we thought would happen. So, yeah, so is there any other questions with it? Because we're going to do it to everybody uniformly throughout the city, we always do that.
Correct.
Okay.
Move to approve amending the pay scales for 23, 24, and 25 with the emergency clause.
Second, including emergency clause.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Is there anything else to come before finance? Hearing nothing, the meeting is adjourned.